All right. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Fine, thank you. Lovely, lovely seeing you via this platform.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor. I'm a privileged person, being here, chatting, talking, with you. So yeah, I'm just like shocked. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I know you are very busy, especially right now. You have so many activities, going on. I don't know if you have started Ake festival. I don't know if.
Can you hear the thunder?
Mm,
Can you hear the
no,
thunder? No? Oh,
not
that's
really.
good. That's good because there's thunder, because there's heavy rain. And
Mm,
Lagos rain is like, this is rainforest.
yeah, yeah, I know, I know. Yeah.
Mm.
So thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. It's really my pleasure. It's really, really my pleasure to be here. It's my great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the interest in Indigo. Thank you for reading Indigo, and thank you for inviting me for this.
No, thank you indeed. Okay, thank you for sending me this hard copy from Nigeria. Okay. Uh, I really loved reading, okay, your collection of short stories. So it's a pleasure. And of course, I didn't hesitate to contact you and have this interview. Okay, so I'm very pleased to meet you. Okay, so Molara, first of all, on behalf of the
My
Finnish,
pleasure too.
thank you, thank you, thank you. So on behalf of the Finnish-African Society, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a chat with us. Okay. And
Thank you.
this,
Thank you.
thank you indeed. This interview is part of the Finnish-African literature, okay, art project. And this is an initiative of the Finnish-African Society whose intention is to create awareness and promote African literary works from the
Oh,
African
wow.
continent to Helsinki,
Wonderful.
residents, and beyond. Okay. So I'm honored to share 25 minutes with you, a creative writer, journalist, literary editor, and critic. You
Yes.
currently write, okay, an art column for The Guardian in Lagos. You have,
I used to. Mhm.
you used to. Okay, all right. Because you started and then you have like a gap and then you went back
Yes.
again. Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yes.
remember
Yes.
that. Cool. So you have been arts and culture editor of Next newspaper. You were a member of the panel of judges for the 2015 Etisalat Prize for Literature. And currently,
Yes.
this one is called Nine Mobile Prize for Literature. Yeah,
It is.
and it is. Yeah. So, and you are also on the advisory board of the Ake Arts and Book Festival, which is one of the most prestigious literary festivals in Africa. And
Indeed.
obviously, you are the author of Indigo, a lovely collection of short stories.
Thank you.
That I mean, this collection of short stories should be, let me tell you, should be translated into different languages. Yeah, it should. Okay, it should.
Thank you. Thank you for that thought. Yeah.
My pleasure. So, thank you again, okay, for your time. And Molara, I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to write Indigo, and where do you get the ideas for your short stories?
Okay. Um, each of the short stories is almost like a whole backstory in itself. They were written over many years, over a period of many years, with the exception of all of the other stories that were written when I was still in London. And, I was, you mentioned earlier me being a columnist for The Guardian, the Lagos Guardian here in Nigeria, but I first wrote for them every Sunday. I had a column for 3 years, from 2003 to 2006, and I was in London. But even though we were in London, the Nigerian literary community at the time, especially for my generation, because it was before social media. It was before social media, it was before WhatsApp, it was before all of this. All we had was email and the Yahoo groups. And it's thunder is going off over the roof, but it's great. So we have a lot of atmospherics here. So, and in the Yahoo groups, it was very, very vibrant because we had Nigerian writers from all over the world. Nigerian writers based all over the world. Some were in the Caribbean, some were in the US, some in other parts of Europe, some like myself were in the UK, many of them were in Nigeria. But it was like we had some kind of village square where we talked about our reality, our country, the politics, the literature, and all delved together by love of words, about the arts, about writing, especially. A lot of us were writers. And of course, I started writing fiction because originally I was writing nonfiction, and I've always written nonfiction. I'm writing nonfiction to this day because I contribute articles all over the place, even now, even though I'm not specifically affiliated to any particular newspaper. So I was encouraged to start writing fiction because a number of my scholar friends, writer friends, remarked that in the nonfiction that I wrote, they said that they could detect a fiction writer in there. And so I was encouraged. And there was a particular one, Wale Adebanwi, who's at the University of Oxford now. He's a professor. He, in particular, said to me, what are you waiting for? You'd better write this fiction that I can see in the imaginative way in which you do your writing. And I didn't want him to ask me in a year's time and say, okay, so where's the fiction? I wanted to be able to have something to tell him if he asked me. And so I started writing fiction. And also I was writing fiction because I was in this group, this virtual group, with a lot of Nigerians where everybody was writing, either you were a poet or something. And so I started to write fiction, but also there was a sense of there having been a long gestation period. There was a sense of it was inevitable, if you know what I mean, because I think that in my sensibility, in my psyche, I've always, even when I was a child, I've always been a writer. I've always seen the significance of things. I've always seen the higher significance of things. I've always, like remembered memorable lines and things like that. So I've always had this kind of imagination. So it was kind of like inevitable. And so I started to write these short stories, and I joined Zoetrope, which is the online workshop started by Francis Ford Coppola. Thousands of writers registered, and I was there, and I would put these short stories there for workshop. I would review other people's draft stories, and some writers, if they felt they liked the title of my story, might read it, and they'd give me feedback. And so I was fine-tuning these. So most of these, there are 17 short stories in Indigo, 16 of them were written in England. But the titular story, the first one, which is Indigo, was written in 2010 during the Kane workshop in Kenya.
Yes, and I remember that.
Yes, and I was already back in Nigeria then. Yes, and I think from 2006 onwards, I started to submit these short stories to journals, and occasionally some of them got accepted and were published. So, and that gave me confidence that, well, maybe I was onto something.
Oh, you need to keep writing. Yeah, fiction.
So,
definitely.
I don't know if I answered your question about the inspiration, but the inspirations come from all over the place,
Yeah, lovely,
Yeah.
lovely. You spent 20 years in England, and it's obvious that there are some traces left on some of your short stories. You can tell that. So were you also considered, as Buchi Mecheta's novel, a second-class citizen when you lived in England?
Well, no one ever was willing, no one ever said that. You see, Britain is a society, I don't know about now with Boris Johnson in power, but in the years up until 2008, when I left, we had a lot of, we had nearly about 10 years or so that were Labour governments. And before then, it was the Tory government. But the Britain that I lived in was one where there was a lot of talk about tolerance, okay? And if you worked in an office, there are still many, many policies they have that would be useful in many other societies. So you knew that in the workplace, you were not supposed to make crude remarks or unkind or insensitive remarks about people based on their difference. There were, you know, checklists that employers had to take to show that they had X percentage of people from Black African background, Black Caribbean, other Black people, other Europeans. And this was even before we had a lot of people coming in from Europe, which also changed, you know, something to do with, at a point with the EU, more people, especially from Eastern Europe, where, you know, came in. And so on paper, it's an equitable society on paper. And there are policies and there are laws, and sometimes those laws are useful. But in everyday terms, you still have to get past human beings. And so they would never be so crude. And that's why it's been hard for a lot of, say, maybe white people to accept that there's racism in Britain, because they would ordinarily, unless you met somebody who was an out and out racist, British people are very reticent and they're very subtle. A British person can abuse you and you don't realize, especially when you're coming as somebody from elsewhere, okay, as an immigrant or whatever, because the codes of language are also different. Yes. And so a British person might say something condescending to you and you don't realize until 3 days later that they've been offensive. And that confirms their preconception that you're dumb because you're African, because you're Black. But it's not that you're dumb, it's because the codes, the social codes are different. The language codes are different. The breadth of the usage of the language is different. And so if you're coming newly from elsewhere, it's the same if you're coming in from Spain. A lot of codes, you know, you may not immediately understand in British society. And also because a lot of the idioms are based on, you know, their own history there. So if a British person says to you, Bob's your uncle, in Nigeria, to the average Nigerian, it has no meaning. It has a meaning to me because I've been in Britain. I'm, you know, I'm a translated person in that sense. So it's a society where the lip service is paid and there are policies that says this is how you should treat people. This is, you should have representation. But in practice, it's not so. And you still have to get past human beings. Don't get me wrong. I love London, especially. London is my favorite city. I live in Lagos now, and I am unabashed in telling you that I love London. And I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I got in Britain. And I also believed that I contributed back. Okay, I was a good member of my community. I paid my taxes and all of this. So I also contributed to Britain. And Britain gave me also a lot of opportunities, and a lot of even how I see the world now is influenced by my life in Britain. But there is racism in Britain. There is racism. And that's not that everybody is racist, but there is racism, and you would also encounter racism, and there was no way to talk about it. You know, so if you were in the workplace and there was a colleague that was doing things, if you went to go and talk to your superior about it, they were likely to, you know, they were likely to want to just talk through it. And, you know, these days we would say gaslighting, right? But at the time we didn't have the word, we didn't have the term.
Yeah,
in
that's right.
Common usage now, gaslighting. I mean, you know, it's from the film Gaslight, but it's only in recent years that gaslighting has become a widely used term for when you try. But that's what used to happen, that even if people experience racism, it would seem like it's something in their mind. Oh, he didn't mean it. And also the other white people in the workplace might close ranks. Yeah. But also there were lots of white people with whom I had very, very meaningful relationships. In the acknowledgement to Indigo, for instance, I thank Melanie and Alex. This is a white mother and son who were they were like family to us, and they still are. And they were the most open-minded people you could find. And the other day I placed a video call to my son in London, and he happens to be somewhere sitting down with Alexander. They've known each other since they were you know, like a few months old. They're still friends. So there are wonderful people everywhere.
Of course.
But you do also encounter a lot of racism for which there's no framework for discussing it. There was no framework for discussing it with sincerity and to really have your concerns dealt with. Instead, you would be made to feel like either you were aggressive or you were imagining it and so on and so forth. Sorry, I'm going on. I can talk for Nigeria.
No. Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. Yeah. Thank you so much. Molara, I started reading your collection of short stories, and on the very first page, I found a term. Okay, the term is childlessness. Childlessness, which is one of the recurring themes of the African literatures. Infertility and childlessness. So my question is today sterility and infertility in Nigeria as critical or acute as it used to be?
You mean the stigma against
yes,
childlessness?
Yes, the stigma. Because I was shocked, you know, sorry.
It's about the societal attitudes, really. We don't have a higher rate of childlessness than any other society. We don't have a higher rate. We probably have more. You know, I'm Yoruba, for instance. I'm Yoruba. Let me pronounce it properly for my Yoruba people. I'm Yoruba, okay? And it's a known fact. It's science. It's in books. We natural born twins in the world.
Yes,
okay?
That's right.
And there are studies into this, into why. And we have Ere Ibeji, we have carvings that are, you know, a veneration of twins. So there's a lot of procreation in this land. So it's really about societal attitudes and societal expectations. Just this morning, before I did a tweet earlier on today, just before, you know, talking to you now. And it was because I saw a video of an elderly woman who was being evicted from her accommodation where she lived for, and she's screaming. And the video, because now social media privacy is not so respected anymore, and so many things that, you know, maybe they're not our business to know, but we get to, you're on the social media and you just see a video and there it is. And she's screaming and she says, all these years, no husband, no child. And this is a woman of maybe nearly 60. And my heart broke for her because it's not supposed to be an issue. It's not supposed to be an issue. There are too many people in Nigeria anyway. We don't need everybody having children or but it's just cultural attitudes about you must procreate. You must procreate. And then, as you know, there's always a certain number of people, for whatever reason, who have difficulty procreating or having children. And it then gets blamed often on the woman. It's always assumed that the woman is the one with the problem.
Yes.
And so it's still an issue. It's
still an issue.
And it becomes a major burden in women's lives. It becomes a major burden in the lives of, if a woman finds themselves in that kind of situation, they have to make do with whispers about them, all kinds of people prognosing in their business. And also the notion of privacy is not enough people, because there's some things you shouldn't say to someone who is not, you shouldn't even say to another adult, but people will make it their business to try and solve the problem for you. So because they keep talking about it, it becomes magnified. So it's still an issue. It's still an issue. And a story such as Indigo is trying to show that this is the emotional impact on the woman who has to suffer this, to try and show that it's unfair. If you look at the story of the protagonist in Indigo, I'm trying to remind myself of her name. For
Idera. Her name is Idera.
Which means yes, Idera. Thank you. Which means comfort. Comfort, ease.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, right. In Yoruba. In Yoruba.
Yes, in Yoruba. Yes.
Okay.
Idera, yes. To me, I'm not even sure that Idera had any issues with fertility. So what happens in Nigeria is that first, there's a pressure on you to get married. And we're living in the 21st century now. There's not even enough regard paid to the fact that what if people don't want to get married? What if they don't even want to marry a member of the same, of the other sex? Do you understand?
Yeah, of course.
We have different genders now. We have, different sexualities, but it's very heteronormative.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, you're 24 now, you should marry. Yeah. So you're a woman, you should marry a man. You're a man, you should marry. It also means that you have a lot of people who are living in the closet in so many different ways. So they must marry, then they get married. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes people want to get married, because have you seen our weddings? The best weddings in the world, the best wedding ceremonies in the world. It's just, everyone just has it. So sometimes people want a wedding party.
Get
married, and by 1 year, and I've seen this happen so many times, by 1 year, people start to say, so where's the baby? So they're expected to produce a child almost straight away. The idea of even waiting to, get that career goal and things like that before you start to, have children, it's completely out of the window. So I wrote a story like that to try and show that this is, to show that this is not right. It's not right. And it's none of our business whether people have children or not. And people should do what they want to do in their own time. And if they don't want to do it, it's all great.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a recurring theme issue that I see every time I open a Nigerian novel. Yeah, and I was like shocked, because it was the very first page, page 11. Yeah, and childlessness. That's the very last paragraph. So and I said, wow, this happens again. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Also,
it's an issue, and then sometimes even if some people have only girls, then they say, okay, so you have to have a boy. I mean, it's just outrageous. It's outrageous.
Yes.
So that it's actually not exaggerated. This is an issue.
Yeah, it's the reality. Yeah. I can tell.
And it's an issue that is policed by society, by women as well as men. Even women policies. You can see the aunt in Indigo who believes that Idera has no right to speak because she has not had a baby.
Yeah. Sometimes women don't make this issue, easier. Sometimes it doesn't help. Yeah, definitely. Page 50, going back again to the short collection of short stories. Page 50 opens with a short story called Kalimos Woman. Kalimos
Yes.
Woman. This one reminds me of literature written about the Nigeria-Biafra War and novels such as Destination Biafra by Buchi Mecheta, Never Again by Flora Wampa, and a lot of writers such as Wolso Yinka, Chinua Achebe, Chinelo
Chimamanda
Paranta.
Ngozi Adichie.
Yeah, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Yeah, of course. The Half of a Yellow Sun. You know, a lot of writers from Nigeria. So when I finished reading your short story, there was one thing that kept me thinking, and it's sex in exchange for freedom in war times. Molara, what was the women's role during the Nigeria-Biafra war?
I think that I think the women's role during Biafra is still unfolding. You also have to bear in mind the historical context. For instance, we, the Yorubas, would have been in the Nigeria side of the war. And, you know, the Igbos were likely in the, how shall we put it, the Biafra side, okay? And of course, this was in the 60s, the 60s ending in 1970, I think.
Yes.
So people like us were, you know, I was a tiny baby. I was a tot, as we say in England. So with the war, I tend to want to just listen because I'm not from the Biafran side of things, and to listen to the angst of people from Biafra, people from the defunct Biafra, and so on and so forth. But I know that what I can tell you is that from what we've read, the contributions or the role of women, they have been largely ignored in the historical accounts.
Yes.
Of the nonfiction that I have on the war, there's only one by a former soldier on the Nigerian side, a general actually, Godwin Alabi Isama. I have it here, The Tragedy of Victory, it's called. It's a big book. It's the only one that I've seen where there was an attempt to show that the way the contribution and the role of women during the war on both sides of the divide, maybe more to the Nigerian side. And there's a lot of photographs of Nigerian female soldiers, Nigerian women in the army, in the armed forces. But Kelemos Woman, I will say, came out of not so much the war, but Nigeria's history of military coups. Someone like me, we grew up in military coup after military coup. And even now, when I go out on the streets of Lagos, I always talked about the militarized psychology of Nigerian society. The fact that you will be in the traffic and soldiers order vehicles, you know, proper car owners or order you off to one side of the road so that they can pass. They are not subject to the rules of everyone else because they think that they are superior to everybody because they ruled Nigeria for so many years. We've had so many since 1966, when we had the first coup. We've had so many military coups, and even the people who are civilian, now that we're in a democracy, it's a quote unquote democracy. You know, I question the kind of democracy we have. Even the people who then put on civilian clothes and the flowing agbada to come and rule over us are mostly former military men. Buhari, who is in power now, is a former military man, and you can see the effects of that all over Nigerian society, everything just unraveling because you have people who are not really Democrats and they just want to lay down the law. Because the military used to issue decrees. So I will tell you that in my teenage years, I have so many strong memories of government suddenly ending and a military coup has taken over. And when I read Kelemo's Woman now, I wrote this in London in the mid 2000s, mid noughties. And when I see, it seems so real to me now. And I ask myself, how did I get it so right? How did I represent? I'm not saying it's the best representation, but to me, it feels real. It feels authentic.
Definitely.
Yeah, it feels the kind of psychology that is at work there. And I think, but I'd been living in England for so many years. How did I tap into that? And I think it's because of just growing up in that
environment.
Yes, when military and so I think that's what Kelemo's Woman comes out of. Because of course we had the military, especially by the mid-90s, Nigerians had to fight tooth and nail for the democracy that we are quote unquote enjoying today. And a lot of activism, so there's also a lot of record of that. And I think that's what informs Kelemo's Woman. But even the stories of military coups, they are male stories.
Yes.
They are male stories. And so me writing Kelemo's Woman and Iriola, the protagonist there, it's an attempt to put a woman center into what is ordinarily rendered as a male story. I think it's my attempt to do some kind of feminist telling of the story of a coup. And yes, the exchange for sex, yes. I was younger when we were having the military coups, so it's not like I'm aware of anything like that, but there will have been a lot of trade-offs like that. And it happens, it's still happening, but I also think to a certain extent, the transactional sex but also it's also a story of desperation. I mean, people's lives are, yes, freedom taken away, everything is going to be canceled, and lives are at stake. And so she thinks, what can I think we have issues like that in war or conflict situations all over the world. So I think it's also a human thing, even though it may not necessarily be the approach that I would take, but I think it's also a human thing that we may not approve of her choices, but it's a choice.
They need to survive, of course.
Yeah, to survive. But I think, we read stories now of, refugee situations and all that, and we hear of her. So, but I also think that the transactional element of it is universal. It's something that can be replicated in any place, give or take a few details.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks a lot. Molara, how do you see African literature in the next 10 years? Because I see a big change, for the last 10 years. And how do you see the following 10 years?
Yes, I've seen the big change myself. And even though we were working for an opening up of the space, what's happened to a certain extent has been beyond our imagination. In the 2000s, I had a literary blog, Words Body, which was probably the leading one on African literature and the arts at the time. It's still on the internet somewhere. And we were working to, talk about books by African writers and all of this. And what's happened in the last 10 years or so is far beyond anything that we thought that we were striving for. And so it's difficult to say what the next 10 years will be. But I think the dam has opened in the sense that in the mid 2000s, you had Chimamanda Adichie, and a few, came up obviously like a flagship. But there were a number of other people also rising. But now we have so many.
Thank God.
The sky is full of so many African literary stars. But when I first started writing about literature, writing for the newspapers, writing for journals and all of that, we didn't have so many writers, African writers with foreign publishing deals. We didn't have so many. It was still hard to find books by African writers in mainstream bookshops in the UK. Maybe they would be on a little shelf. But now you have it's opened up. We still have a long way to go, but it's opened up much more than that. And you have publishers signing on African writers. And if you don't have an African writer, then, I'm sure they will be trying to fix that. So I see that improving. Well, I think I can answer your question about where do I see. I also see on the African continent here, I see us also taking back the reins as much as possible. I see us having a greater impact because you have quite a number of publishers in Nigeria now that have only started in the last 10 years.
Yeah, like Cassava, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Narrative Landscape, Reader Books, where I work, and many others. Parasia, who they publish Indigo. And this is also being replicated across Africa, maybe not as big a space as Nigeria. Nigeria, where there's so many of us, we dominate. Dominate anything you allow us to dominate. But you have in Uganda, in South Africa, in Kenya, for instance, you have Zukizwa Vana, starting even a publishing firm there, and bookshops opening. So I see us asserting ourselves more so that we can also, because part of what's happened with our literature is a lot of the tastes being dictated from the West. Okay, and so, but I think as we have more leverage, we can take back part of the narrative. So I see that happening, and I expect more and more people write. I think it's really, really happened now that so many people, I think back in the day, people would have had difficulty telling their families that they wanted to be writers, but now I think it's really seen as something you can be and a life that you can live. So
yeah, things have changed a lot. On top of that, we have new festivals, new African festivals.
Festivals, initiatives. Yes, you have few journals coming up, and the journals are initiating master classes so that they can grow the next generation of writers. So
that's great.
Yes, I expect this to keep burgeoning. Yes.
I'm gonna close the interview with the very last question. I really love talking, with you. I would spend, hours and hours. I really want to go soon to the Ake Festival, meet you, and stay with you a couple of hours.
I look forward.
When
COVID-19 is over.
Yeah, I know. So next year, probably. Yeah. Because I don't want to, see any virtual thing anymore. I want to go there and see it with my own eyes. So, and the very last question, what is your favorite female writer? African, of course. It's a hard question, but you can tell me one, two or three writers.
Oh, this is so hard.
Yeah, I know.
What can I talk about? One or two, maybe more than one person?
Sure.
I think from the previous generation, Ama Ata Aido really towers and stands out, and she's someone that She writes great stories, wonderful poems, but also she's been engaged for many decades and remains engaged and engaging and is still working. And also, when you think about her themes, I would like to be a bit like that, because she was someone that did not just write about Ghanaian society, but also she wrote about Black people in the ways that they are connected to Black people in other places. So she has, a play that is about the transatlantic slave trade and that has an African-American character back in Ghana and having to deal with the legacy of the slave trade. And that's something that I don't think that writers here on the continent engage enough. So I would like to be like that, to write about our lives here, our condition, our realities, but also to have a sense of strong awareness of what is happening elsewhere. So she's that. For my generation, it's hard to mention anyone without offending others, but some people stand out for me. I've read Zukizwa Vanna. I love her works. I like the way that she also engages in the literary environment. I like the fact that also her notion of our writing community extends beyond her immediate borders to different parts of Africa. So it's a very, very Pan-African viewpoint. I like lots of people. Lola Shonenyi's The Secret Lives of Abasegi's Wives has become a phenomenon.
Yes, it is.
It's no longer a novel, it's a phenomenon.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if you knew that I'm going to translate the novel into Spanish next year. Yeah, April 2002.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
We look forward to that. And so I read widely. I read a lot of contemporary writers, female and otherwise, and I admire a lot of them. It's just that I cannot immediately now think of.
There are so many. There are so many. It's hard to stick to just one writer. Yeah, you have good staff, very good staff over there in Nigeria and Ghana and Kenya.
Yes, I also read a lot of Latin American fiction and Latin American fiction. For me, I see it the same thread linking to us here.
Definitely, yes.
So that fascinates me greatly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably why I love, African literature. After reading, in Argentina, where I'm originally from, 20 years of Latin American literature, I see a connection, between Latin American.
I see a massive connection, and that fascinates me so much. Yes.
Yeah.
Maurice Conde was the lead feature for Ake Festival last year, and that is a great writer that I admire.
Lovely.
And writing straddles Africa and the Caribbean.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, I just read 3 books in just a week. Yeah, it's, she's great. Yeah, Maurice Conde. Yeah, so good. Okay. All right, Molara Wood. It was a pleasure. You have made my day. Yeah. So
thank you so much. You made my day.
No, you did mine. So thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure. And I look forward to meeting you in Nigeria pretty soon. Hopefully, when the COVID situation is done, over. I hope I have the chance to meet you in person. Yeah.
I look forward. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's been wonderful talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for sending me this marvelous, short story collection. So thank you. Thanks a lot.